Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Tuesday Talk. We are so excited to have with us today Pooja Kapoor from HEB. She is a lead dietitian for the HEB Nutrition Services team, and we are kicking off our meal solutions series. So this week we will be focusing on breakfast, and the following weeks Pooja will talk through lunch and dinner, and then at the end we will have a live Q&A session. So we are so thrilled to have you here with us. And for everyone that's watching, if you have questions or any comments, feel free to drop them in the comments section in Facebook, and we'll compile a big list for that live Q&A in a few weeks. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. So like she said, today we're going to talk about building a balanced breakfast. But before that, before we get into all the breakfast goodies, just wanted to introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about who I am as a dietitian and how I got to this position. So a little bit about my education. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin now apparently 9 years ago with a bachelor's in nutrition. And then I also got a master's at A&M in Kingsville. And a master's is something that's more and more required for registered dietitians too. And regarding my work experience, so as you can see, Memorial Hermann Health System, Harris Health System, and then Christus Spohn Trauma Center. So I've had a lot of experience working in hospitals and very clinical settings. But it was actually through that where I realized I want to work at a grocery store. And the reason that that actually happened, the reason that that change happened is because I was working in the hospital, making the rounds on the floor, going through the ICU, and I was visiting with a lot of people who were there either due to diabetes complications or some sort of heart disease or a stroke or something to that effect. And I just kept thinking, so much of this is preventable. You know, if we just learned how to eat better, how to exercise better, maybe manage our lifestyles a little bit differently, so many of these conditions wouldn't have to happen, or they wouldn't have to go as far as they did. So all along, as I was working in the hospital, I learned about this program at HEB, where we do exactly that. We work with people and we teach them how to be preventative. So we teach you how to read labels, how to go through the grocery store. And so that's a little bit about why my career transitioned from very clinical into the retail space. And also just to let you know, as a real person, I do enjoy traveling and running, working out, eating, enjoying a beverage or two. So know that your dietitians are here to help you live your best life, but we also do that ourselves. We're real people, so you don't have to be worried about we're not eating fruits and vegetables all the time. And then a little bit about HEB. So for anyone who's not familiar, so HEB is a Texas-based grocery company, family owned and operated since 1905. We've got about more than, numbers always growing, but more than about 340 stores within Texas and Mexico. And it's a very community-oriented grocery store. And so what that means is HEB is very much, the family that started the company is very much about giving back to the community and really serving the community's needs. And so you'll see HEB present in a lot of different organizations around the community. So giving back to the school system, working with kids and working on reading, disaster preparedness, disaster relief. If you're familiar with HEB in Houston right now, they're actually getting prepared for dealing with a hurricane, which is something that they're always just giving back and looking out for the community. So it's a little bit about HEB, and then more specifically, what is HEB Nutrition Services? So that's where we've got this wonderful team of dietitians that pre-COVID, we were working in the stores, and you could actually book an appointment with us, visit us in the store, and we would actually be able to walk you through the store. We could figure out what are your nutrition related goals, what are the foods that you need to eat, what are the foods maybe we stay a little bit further away from, and how do we use the foods in this grocery store to actually help you live your best life. And so that's where that change switched from my clinical setting, because when you're in the grocery store and you're shopping with somebody, we are physically grabbing a grocery cart, we are going shopping together and reading labels. So we're in the aisles together, and I'm asking you, hey, what's this bread that you're eating, or what's this tortilla that you're having, or what's your favorite pasta to have? And you'll go out there and you pick it up off the aisle, and then maybe I'll suggest one that's maybe like a little bit better for you, lower carbohydrate, higher fiber, something to that effect. So we're physically changing your basket, shopping with you, just showing you how to eat what you like to eat, but maybe just do it in a little bit of a better fashion to support those needs. So getting into today's topic about breakfast, is first we start off with what should your plate actually look like. So thinking about years ago, we used to have something that was like a food pyramid, and that has now switched to actually looking like a plate called MyPlate. And so we switched to something like that because having it on a plate versus trying to interpret this pyramid, the plate is actually a lot more applicable to our daily life. So when you're thinking about what should your plate look like, what should you be putting on there, you really want to think about having half of that plate to be fruits and vegetables. You want about a quarter of your plate to be lean protein. So it's about the same size as about like the size of your palm, maybe a little bit bigger than your palm. That's the amount of lean protein you would want to have on your plate. And then you also want to focus on a quarter of your plate being grains. And so grains are those foods like your breads, your rice, your pastas, your starches. Ideally, we prefer having whole grains, but a quarter of that plate should be grains. So if you closed your hand and you made a fist, that's approximately the size of the amount of grains you want to have on your plate. And of course, everything is flexible, so you don't have to have this plate looking exactly like this every single time that you're eating, but ideally, this is what we're striving for. So speaking specifically to breakfast, first we want to talk about why is breakfast important. So a couple reasons why breakfast is actually very important for us. It's our first fuel of the morning. And so when you think about whenever you ate dinner the night before, you went to bed, you slept for many, many hours, you wake up in the morning, you do want to nourish your body. It's the first fuel for the morning. It gives your body a good sense of energy so that you can perform throughout the day. It's also an opportunity to include more and more fruits and vegetables. So there are these things that come out every 5 years that are called the dietary guidelines for Americans. And unfortunately, what comes up every 5 years is that every age group, every gender, every category that they organize us by, every category is not eating enough fruit and they're not eating enough vegetables. So by including a breakfast, it gives you the opportunity to have an additional meal in order to add more fruits and vegetables. Because if you think about, if we're skipping breakfast and we're really just relying on lunch and dinner, it's very hard to fit in all those servings of fruits and vegetables that you need throughout the day in only 2 meals. So if we can add in a third meal, kind of spreads out that burden of adding in more fruits and vegetables so that we can actually meet some of those needs a little bit better. And then lastly, the reason breakfast is important is because it also helps out with proper portion sizes at the following meal. So if you think about sometimes if we're skipping breakfast, now we're super, super hungry at lunch, and it's a lot harder to have the proper portion sizes and have this proper plate distribution when you're really hungry. Because I know it happens to myself too. Remember, dietitians are real people. So sometimes when I miss breakfast, whenever I eat lunch the next day or the following meal, it's really hard to say like, no, I should have half of my plate fruit and vegetable because I'm so hungry and I know that maybe some of those vegetables aren't as appetizing or they're not going to fill me up as much and I want to indulge in something else. So when we have breakfast, keeps us nice and stable for a little bit. That way at the following meal, we can make better decisions regarding portion sizes. And then regarding the what, so what do we want to eat for breakfast? We want to eat some protein. So remember, protein is really great. It can come from animal sources. It can come from plant sources. However you decide to get your protein is up to you, but you do want to include some protein at your meals. You also want to include some fiber. So fiber is something that are mostly going to be found in your plant-based foods. So if you think about things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, they're going to have a really great amount of fiber. And fiber is really great to support a good, healthy heart. Fiber can also help to lower your cholesterol. And then also fiber actually digests pretty slowly. So it's going to stay in your body longer. So you'll ideally stay fuller for a little bit longer also. Whole grains kinds of ties into the same thing with your fiber in regards to whole grains support a good, healthy heart. Whole grains can also help to reduce cholesterol. And lastly, whole grains also keep you fuller for a little bit longer as well. And then the last thing we want to include on our plate is some good low-fat dairy. And so dairy is going to include things like milk, it can be yogurt, it could be cottage cheese. could be any other kind of cheese. And dairy is really critical because it's going to have some calcium to support our strong bones. It's also going to have some protein and so many other nutrients too, especially right now, thinking about dairy and the vitamin D that it has. So specifically thinking about COVID times right now, the reality is we're just not getting outside as much as we used to. You know, we're not moving around as much. We're not going outside. There aren't as many places to go, or we just don't have many places to go. So we're missing out on vitamin D because our primary source of vitamin D is coming from the sun. If we're not outside, we're kind of missing out on that vitamin D. And when you're vitamin D deficient, we feel all kinds of issues, but mostly what you're feeling is a lot of fatigue. You're tired, you're kind of sluggish, a little bit of mental fog. And so fixing that with dairy could be a really great way to help just make sure you're getting enough vitamin D when we can't get outside as often. And especially thinking about as we're in this, you know, second half of the year, it's going to be fall soon, it'll be winter. And the other reality is that the sun is just not out as much as it was in the first half of the year. So we're also going to miss out on some vitamin D too. So definitely include some dairy. And if you have any kind of dairy allergy or maybe a lactose issue, there are still other foods that we could get. Maybe it's not dairy, but there are other foods that we could get that'll also give you that really good source of vitamin D. So I wanted to talk to you about easy meal prep solutions. So easy things that you can put together for a single serving or maybe for 2 people, or if you wanted to make it in bulk. I wanted to give you the idea. Also know that all of these ideas are flexible. So you by no means have to follow this recipe or this meal exactly as it is. It's more so just an idea. So also think about your own food allergies, any other medications you're taking, and any of these foods that might conflict with any of that. Just know that this is just a general idea. So this first idea is putting together a breakfast sandwich. And in the sandwich, you've got the whole grain English muffin, you've got eggs, bacon, cheese, and a glass of milk. So if we think about that, your whole wheat, 100% whole grain English muffin, that's taking care of your grains as well as your fiber. Your eggs, in this case, are going to take care of your protein. Same thing along with the Canadian bacon. That's going to take care of your protein. Your cheese, in this case, is also going to have that protein, as well as it's going to count towards some of that dairy, because cheese itself is also going to have that good amount of calcium. And then again, a fat-free milk is also taking care of that calcium. So this meal in itself, while it looks very simple and it looks pretty basic, it's actually taking care of all those nutrients that we just talked about at making sure that you get at each of your breakfast meals. Another idea could be having some migas. So in this case, we're putting together migas with eggs, corn tortillas, some pico, some cheese, some beans, and just a little piece of fruit on the side. So again, if we think about where all of these foods fall into, your eggs going to count as your protein. Your yellow corn tortillas, those are going to count as your grains, because remember, corn, potatoes, they all count as your grains category. So those are going to count towards your grain. If you think about pico, right? So what is pico? It's tomato, it's onions, some peppers, some cilantro, tomatoes, onions, all of that great stuff. That counts as vegetable. So this is a great way to, where, you know, breakfast doesn't usually include vegetables, but if we're throwing in some pico, really great way to now include some vegetables at this breakfast meal. Your sliced cheese, again, that's going to count as your dairy in this case, but it's also going to have a little bit of protein as well. When we're thinking about adding some beans to this, remember, beans are a very, very good source of including fiber. So remember, fiber is something that's really good for our heart. It can also help to lower cholesterol. Beans, whether they are dry beans, whether they are canned beans, however you like to have your beans, they're going to have that very good amount of fiber. They're also going to have some protein because beans just naturally have protein. And if you're thinking about getting canned beans, try to find the option that says no salt added on there, because that's going to make a significant difference in the amount of sodium that's in these canned beans. And then lastly, think about adding some kind of fruit. In this case, it's a kiwi. In the photo, it's an orange. Whatever option you want to add in for your fruit, completely up to you. Again, when we're thinking about the serving size of fruit, it's going to be about 1 cup. If you cup your hand, it's about what fits in your cupped hand. So again, you can have any kind of fruit you want, regardless of if you have diabetes, if you don't, if you have a heart condition. All fruits are wonderful to have. It's just about thinking about the portion size. So maybe if we're thinking about mangoes, they are a little bit higher in sugar, but maybe we just watch the portion size of the mango instead of getting rid of the entire mango itself. Another option, say you don't want to do eggs, it's not your thing, you're more of like a sweet sort of person in the morning. You can also put together a really good Greek yogurt parfait. So the ingredients for this would be half a cup of a Greek yogurt, half a cup of strawberries, half a cup of oats, and then half cup of pecan pieces. So again, if we put everything into that category, your Greek yogurt, that's going to count as your protein because Greek yogurt is very high in protein, and it's also going to count towards your dairy. Your half cup of fresh strawberries, that's going to count as your serving of fruit. Fruits also have fiber. Remember, we talked about things that are fruits, plant-based, vegetables, whole grains that are going to have some fiber. You're also going to add in your toasted oats. And so that's an HEB cereal that we have. It's pretty similar to Cheerios. But again, that's going to be your source of whole grains. It's also going to have that good amount of fiber. And then lastly, it could be pecans. It could be any other kind of nut too. It could be almonds. It could be walnuts, whatever kind of quarter cup of nuts you want to add to that. And the benefit of adding nuts is because nuts are also going to be a source of protein. They're also a source of fiber. Nuts are also really, really good for something called HDL, which is your good cholesterol. So nuts are a really great source to help boost up that HDL a little bit more and really take care of your heart. And no worries, just include some kind of yogurt that'll have less than 10 grams of sugar, more than 10 grams of protein. So that's not going to be all of your yogurts, but really get familiar with the back of the package, look at that nutrition facts label and try to find something definitely with less than 10 grams of sugar. And again, if strawberries isn't your thing, say you've got some blueberries or you've got some bananas that need to be eaten, feel free to swap out whatever kind of fruit for a fruit that you prefer. Our next option could be doing something like a bean and cheese taco. So in this case, we've got the half cup of pinto beans, corn tortillas, you got your cheese, and then again, your small pineapple. So again, pinto beans are going to count towards your fiber, towards your protein, also your grains. So beans are really, really great for us to include. Your yellow corn tortillas, again, they're going to count towards your grain. You're also going to get your protein coming out of your cheese. And remember, your beans are also having that protein as well. And then lastly, whatever half cup of fresh fruit you have, completely up to you, just include some sort of fruit just to help you meet some of those fruit goals throughout the day. Ideally for your fruits and vegetables, it doesn't have to be exactly the same thing every day, but we do want you to get about 5 servings of fruits and vegetables throughout the day. 5 servings minimum. There really is no maximum. If you wanted to have more than 5 servings, that would be great. Just be sure that they're spaced out throughout the day. Another option for one of your breakfast ideas could be doing something like an oatmeal. Eventually it'll get a little bit cooler, and oatmeal is something that's nice and warm, and it feels good to have that in the morning. So an example to make your oats a really good complete sort of meal is to start with your quarter cup of your quick oats. You can add in some fresh fruit like your half cup of blueberries. You can add some pecan pieces, again, for the fiber, for the protein, for the healthy fats. And then again, have something like that dairy, like the 1 cup of that 2% milk, have something on the side. Again, that'll help you get in more protein. It's also going to really target that calcium, that vitamin D as well. Because remember, we tend to have oatmeal when it's a little bit colder outside, meaning that the sun isn't out. We do need to make sure that we still get that vitamin D though, and that's where our body can absorb it from the milk that we're having. You can also do something like an overnight oat. Say you're the type of person who doesn't want to prepare breakfast in the morning, you'd rather do it the night before. You could do something like an overnight oat, which would be taking the same ingredients, putting it in a jar, and you just stick it in the refrigerator overnight, at least for 8 hours. Make sure it doesn't sit more than 2 hours though, because 2 days. Make sure it doesn't sit more than 2 days, because after 2 days, the fruit's gonna get a little bit mushy, the oats are gonna lose their texture. So really try to have it the day after you put that together. And in conclusion, that went by really fast, but remember not to stress too much about how to put these meals together. Ideally, we want you to keep it simple. So what that means is think about what foods you like, what foods you want to have, what foods are already in your pantry, or what's already in your fridge, and think about these meals that you can put together. We do a lot better when we have meals that include less than 5 ingredients. So say you're looking for a recipe, if it's got more than 5 ingredients, just research suggests that it's not something that's going to stick for very long because it requires a lot more work on our end. So think about really, really basic ingredients. Think about what's going to be easy for you to put together. What can you prepare the night before? What can you make in a big batch? What can you use with just minimal ingredients? What can you use, maybe throw it all in a blender and call it a smoothie? What can you put together that has all of these nutrients we're talking about, but what makes it easy on you? Because things that add too much of a challenge or things that just make the mornings a little bit rough, we're not going to stick with them for that long, and we want breakfast to stick around. So think about how to make it simple. Also, think about making a plan. And so that goes a couple different ways. First thing I want you to do when you're thinking about a plan is think about what's happening this week, right? So if we're thinking about breakfast, what time do you wake up? What's that morning routine look like? You know, do you have errands to run in the morning? Do you have doctor's appointments to get to? Do you have any other commitments in the morning that might interfere with that breakfast time? And if you realize that, so maybe that's a day where you prepare something the day before. Maybe it's a day where you put it all together in a blender and you make a smoothie, versus some of the other days where you have a little bit more time. Maybe those are the days where you spend a little bit of extra time putting together a breakfast sandwich, or you put together some migas, you have a little bit of extra time. So think about that. Also, thinking about a plan means putting together a good grocery list. So when you're thinking about, okay, the dietitian said to make sure I get fruits, and I need dairy, and I need grains, and I need this, and I need that. Also, putting all of these things together on your shopping list is a really great way to make sure that you have those ingredients at home. Because a lot of times we have really good incentive of, I'm going to eat fruits every day this week. But if you bought 3 bananas, let's say you had one Monday, you had one Tuesday, you have one Wednesday, what's the plan for fruit now on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? You know, are we going to run out of fruit by a certain time? And when do we need to head back to the store in order to get some of these groceries back in the home? Same thing goes for just keeping a tab on if you're getting yogurt, how much yogurt's left? When do you need to buy more in order to be successful every single day? And then also think about when you're making a plan, what are some of these ingredients that can overlap? So for example, if you're buying eggs and you don't want to have the same meal every day, what else can you use these eggs in order to make different meals? That way you're not buying, 30, 40 different ingredients for these breakfast meals. You're buying a staple few ingredients, but then turning it into different meals. And then lastly, we always want you to eat what you love. If you don't love what you're eating, it's not something that's going to last very long. And ideally, we want you to eat what you love. We want you to have a good plan. We want you to keep it simple. And all of this comes together a lot easier when we're actually enjoying what we're having. The other reality is that if I tell you to eat oatmeal, but you just absolutely despise oatmeal, I don't want you to be unhappy. And it's also a thing that's just not going to stick around for very long. So always eat what you love what you eat, and then all of this will slowly and slowly start to come together a little bit easier. And so next time, we're going to talk a little bit more, next week on September 1st, we're going to talk a little bit more about lunch, some great lunch ideas, just how we talked about breakfast ideas today. But that's going to have a little bit of a different twist because we're going to figure out how to repurpose some of those dinner leftovers into different meals for lunch. We're also going to figure out, learn a little bit more on food safety for your leftovers, because there's a certain amount of time that things will stay good in the fridge or in the freezer. So we'll talk about food safety around that. And then overall, just talking a little bit more about some different meal ideas and different ways to get in all of those necessary nutrients for lunchtime. And that's it for me. I'll give it back to you guys.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, and everyone that's watching, thank you for being here. Just as a reminder, we will have that Q&A at the last week of this series. So I believe that's September 22nd. So get your questions in every week that we have these presentations. You can add questions in the comment section, and we're going to compile a big list. And we will go from there. So thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you, Pooja. for all of the helpful information. And we will be sharing the recipe cards for these breakfast recipes in the comments as well. So you'll be able to try some of those and let us know how they were next week. So we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.